Good morning, everybody, or afternoon if you're on the East Coast. Thank you for attending this webinar. We're very excited for this particular webinar because we get to do something unusual. We get to celebrate actually a brilliant young lady. And as she starts talking about the topic and chloramines and the work she's done, her brilliance will become readily apparent. So, without a further ado, we're going to hop into the webinar. Do say this, right? Any questions you have, please put into chat. The presentation, the webinar will take about 40 minutes or so, and then we'll have about 15, 20 minutes of Q&A. We do ask that all questions go into chat, and then I'll read those out and give chance for Aditi to answer. So, without further ado, I want to introduce Aditi Gandhi. And she is believe it or not, a 17-year-old in high school. And Aditi, I'm just talking you up for a minute. You're doing work that rivals what major companies and international research has done. So before you even get started, I just want to celebrate you and what you've done and your story. And with that being said, my friend, take it away, Aditi.
Well, good morning or good afternoon to everyone. I'm Aditi, like Dewey said. I'm from Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I will be sharing my presentation with you on my research on chloramines. So, without further ado, let's get into it. So I would just like to start formally and say good afternoon or good morning, and thank you to the Council for the Model of Aquatic Health Code for the opportunity to present today. My name is Aditi, and I'm a student researcher from the Blake School in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And today I will be presenting my project title called Continuous Low Cost Proxy Monitoring System for Chloramine Detection in Indoor Pool Air. And this project sits at the intersection of environmental health, engineering, and aquatic safety. It was motivated by a question that began not in the laboratory, but in a swimming pool. As a competitive swimmer, I've spent thousands of hours training in indoor aquatic facilities. Like many swimmers, I became familiar with the strong odors, eye irritation, and occasional respiratory discomfort that are often associated with pool environments. At first, I assumed these experiences were simply a normal part of the sport. However, I learned more about indoor air quality and chloramine formation. I discovered that these symptoms are not merely inconveniences. They are connected to measurable environmental conditions that affect swimmers, coaches, lifeguards, instructors, and facility staff every day. That realization led me to ask a broader question. If chloramines are a well-recognized concern in indoor pools, why do relatively few facilities continuously monitor the air quality conditions associated with them? Current approaches often require specialized equipment, laboratory analysis, or expensive instrumentation. While these methods are valuable, they are not always practical for routine deployment in community pools, schools, and smaller aquatic centers. As a result, many facilities rely on periodic testing, subjective observations, or complaints from swimmers and staff. This project explores an alternative approach. Rather than attempting to directly measure chloramines using expensive instrumentation, I investigated whether a low-cost and continuous embedded monitoring system could track environmental indicators associated with chloramine-related air quality conditions. Throughout this presentation, I will discuss the science behind chloramines, explain the engineering design of the monitoring system, describe the testing methodology, present the results, discuss limitations, and outline future directions for this project. My goal is not to claim that this device replaces traditional chloramine monitoring methods in the lab. Instead, I hope to demonstrate how affordable environmental sensing technologies may provide useful information that complements existing approaches to aquatic air quality management. With that introduction, I would like to briefly tell you a little bit about myself and explain how I became interested in this topic. Before discussing the technical aspects of the project, I would like to provide some context regarding my background and how this research developed. My name is Aditi, and I'm from Minneapolis, Minnesota. My academic interests focus on environmental health, engineering, public health, and development of technologies that can be applied to real-world challenges. This year, I had the privilege of being named a finalist at the 2026 Regeneron International Science and Engineering Fair, or ISEF. It's often called the Super Bowl of science competitions. The Regeneron International Science and Engineering Fair is the most prestigious pre-college STEM research competition globally. Out of roughly 7 million students worldwide who enter local and regional science fairs, only about 1,800 finalists advance to compete, which is about 0.02% of people. Additionally, some of my major awards that stem from this research include I was honored to receive the 3M Young Innovators Award, first place in the Minnesota American Society of Plumbing Engineers Mechanical Engineering Award, the Exceptional Genius Award from Genius Olympiad issued by the Rochester Institute of Technology, and third place in Environmental Health Science Award issued by the Minnesota Environmental Health Association. These experiences have strengthened my interest in applying engineering principles to public health problems. Outside of research, I am also a competitive swimmer and a Minnesota section finalist in the 500 freestyle. Swimming has been a significant part of my life for many years. Because of that, I've spent countless hours inside indoor aquatic facilities. Like many athletes, I became aware that not all pool environments feel the same. Some facilities seem comfortable and well ventilated, while others produce strong odors or noticeable irritation. These observations eventually led me to explore the scientific literature surrounding chloramines in indoor aquatic air quality. As I learned more, I realized that there is an important public health dimension to this issue. Competitive swimmers may spend multiple hours per day training in these environments. Lifeguards and coaches spend entire workdays exposed to the same air. Children participating in swimming lessons may also experience these conditions regularly. The question then became, could engineering provide a practical way to better understand these environments? That question ultimately led to the foundation for the project I am presenting today. With that background established, let's begin by discussing the science that motivates the entire project. Why do chloramines matter? This slide provides the scientific foundation for everything that follows. To understand chloramines, we first need to understand chlorine. Chlorine is one of the most important tools used in swimming pool disinfection. Its purpose is to destroy harmful microorganisms and reduce the risk of illness. Without chlorine, swimming pools would be far less safe. However, chlorine does not remain unchanged after it enters the water. Swimming pools are dynamic environments. Every swimmer introduces substances into the water. These include sweat, body oils, skin cells, personal care products, and in some cases, urine. Many of these substances contain nitrogen compounds. When chlorine reacts with nitrogen-containing compounds, chloramines are formed. There are multiple chloramine species that can develop, but one in particular is important from an air quality perspective. That compound is trichloramine, also known as nitrogen trichloride or NCl3. Unlike dissolved chloramines that remain primarily in the water, trichloramine is volatile. That means it can leave the water and enter the air above the pool. Once airborne, trichloramine tends to accumulate near the water's surface. This area is often referred to as the swimmer breathing zone. This is especially significant because swimmers spend much of their time breathing very close to the water's surface. Competitive swimmers may inhale thousands of breaths in this zone during a single practice session. Coaches, instructors, and lifeguards may also spend extended periods of time in these environments. Research has associated chloramine exposure with several symptoms, including eye irritation, coughing, throat irritation, and respiratory discomfort. Although exposure levels vary significantly between facilities, the scientific community generally recognizes chloramines as an important component of indoor air quality. One of the most interesting misconceptions involves the familiar chlorine smell associated with pools. Many people assume that a strong chlorine odor indicates a clean pool. In reality, the opposite may sometimes be true. The smell that people commonly associate with chlorine is often produced by chloramines rather than free chlorine. A strong odor can therefore indicate that disinfection byproducts are accumulating. This distinction is important because it changes how we think about aquatic environments. The issue is not simply water quality, it is also air quality. Understanding both components is essential for maintaining healthy indoor aquatic facilities. This brings up the central challenge that motivated the project. If chloramines are important, why aren't more facilities continuously monitoring the conditions associated with them? Despite widespread awareness of chloramine-related concerns, most pools do not continuously monitor air quality. There are several reasons for this. First, many routine pool measurements focus on water chemistry. Facility operators commonly monitor parameters such as free chlorine, combined chlorine, pH, alkalinity, and temperature. These measurements are extremely important and provide valuable information regarding pool operation. However, they do not directly indicate what swimmers are breathing. Water chemistry and air quality are related, but they are not identical. A pool can have acceptable water chemistry while still experiencing localized air quality concerns. Second, direct air sampling methods do exist. Researchers have developed techniques capable of measuring trichloramine concentrations. These methods can provide valuable data and contribute significantly to scientific understanding. However, they often involve specialized equipment, trained personnel, laboratory analysis, or time average sampling procedures. Such methods may not always be practical for continuous monitoring. Third, indoor aquatic environments are highly dynamic. Conditions change throughout the day. Swimmer occupancy increases and decreases, ventilation systems cycle, temperature and humidity fluctuate, and as a result, air quality conditions can change significantly over relatively short periods of time. A single measurement may not fully represent conditions across an entire day. Facilities need information about changing environmental conditions, but continuous direct chloramine monitoring is not always practical. For community pools, schools, and recreational facilities, affordability becomes a major consideration. The challenge is finding a balance between scientific rigor and practical implementation. That challenge led directly to the central research question for this project. The central question guiding this project was, can a low-cost, embedded system monitor proxy indicators associated with chloramine-related air quality conditions? Several parts of this question are important. The first phase is low cost. The objective was not to develop another expensive monitoring platform. Instead, I wanted to explore whether commercially available components could provide meaningful information while remaining accessible to a wide range of facilities. The second phase is embedded system. An embedded system is a self-contained device that performs dedicated function. In this case, that function is environmental monitoring. The system needed to operate independently, collect data continuously, display information in real time, and store measurements for analysis. The third phase is proxy indicators. This concept is central to the project. Rather than directly measuring trichloramine concentration, the system monitors environmental variables that reflect conditions associated with chloramine formation, accumulation, or exposure risk. This approach shifts the focus from absolute concentration measurement to trend detection. In many environmental monitoring applications, understanding trends can be extremely valuable. If environmental conditions consistently worsen during certain periods of the day, facility operators may be able to identify patterns and make informed decisions. To guide development, I established 6 primary design goals. The system needed to be low cost, portable, capable of continuous monitoring, able to display information in real time, simple to deploy, and capable of providing actionable insight. These goals served as the framework for all subsequent engineering decisions. Once the research question was established, the next step was determining how such monitoring systems can actually be built. That brings us to the hardware architecture and overall system design. Now that I've introduced the research question and design objectives, I'd like to explain how the monitoring system was built. The overall goal was to create a device that could continuously collect environmental data while remaining portable, affordable, and easy to deploy. At the center of the system is a Raspberry Pi Pico microcontroller. The Raspberry Pi Pico serves as the computational core of the device. Its responsibilities include communicating with sensors, collecting environmental measurements, processing incoming data, updating the display, and coordinating data logging. I selected the Raspberry Pi Pico for several reasons. First, it is inexpensive compared to many commercial embedded platforms. Second, it provides sufficient computational power for environmental sensing applications. Third, it supports a variety of communication protocols that simplify sensor integration. And finally, it has a large educational and engineering community, which makes troubleshooting and development more accessible. Connected to the microcontroller are several environmental sensors that continuously monitor conditions in the surrounding air. The sensor measurements are collected and processed in real time. The results are displayed on an OLED screen mounted directly on the device. This allows users to immediately observe environmental conditions without requiring an external computer. The OLED display was intentionally included because one of the design goals was usability. I wanted the system to function as a standalone monitoring instrument. If a facility operator places the device on a pool deck, they should be able to view environmental conditions immediately. The device is powered by a portable battery pack. This battery-powered design eliminates the need for external wiring and allows the system to be deployed in a variety of locations. Portability is particularly important because environmental conditions can vary significantly throughout an aquatic facility. A portable system allows monitoring at different locations without requiring permanent installation. The enclosure houses all components in a compact package. Although the enclosure itself may seem like a minor design element, it plays an important role in protecting electronics while maintaining adequate airflow to the sensors. Too much enclosure restriction can negatively affect sensor performance. Too little protection can expose components to moisture and damage. Finding the correct balance required several iterations during development. Overall, the completed system functions as a self-contained environmental monitoring platform, capable of continuous operation. However, understanding how the system works requires discussing an important concept that guided sensor selection. That concept is proxy sensing. Now, you may be wondering, why measure proxies instead of chloramines directly? One of the most common questions people ask about this project is simple. Why not measure chloramines directly? It's an important question. If chloramines are the concern, measuring chloramines directly would seem like the most logical solution, right? However, real-world monitoring is often constrained by cost, complexity, and practicality. Direct chloramine measurements techniques can require specialized instrumentation, laboratory analysis, or advanced sampling procedures. These methods are valuable and scientifically rigorous, but they are not always practical for continuous deployment. As a result, I explored an alternative approach known as proxy sensing. Proxy sensing involves measuring variables that may be associated with the phenomenon of interest. Instead of attempting to directly measure trichloramine concentration, The system monitors environmental conditions that may reflect chloramine-related exposure risk. The first variable selected was total volatile organic compounds, or TVOC. TVOC represents a broad measurement of volatile compounds present in the environment. It does not identify specific chemicals. However, it can provide useful information regarding changes in airborne chemical conditions. The second variable was equivalent carbon dioxide, or ECO2. Equivalent carbon dioxide measurements are generally generated using sensor algorithms that estimate occupancy-related environmental conditions. While ECO2 is not a direct measurement of chloramines, it can provide a contextual information about changes occurring within an occupied indoor space. The third variable was temperature. Temperature influences the behavior of many chemical compounds. As temperature increases, volatility generally increases as well. This means airborne compounds may enter the atmosphere more readily under warmer conditions. The fourth variable was relative humidity. Humidity affects how airborne contaminants behave after entering the air. Indoor pools naturally operate in humid environments. Changes in humidity can influence containment persistence, transport, and dispersion. Together, these variables provide a multidimensional view of environmental conditions. The objective was never to calculate an exact trichloramine concentration. Instead, the goal was to determine whether these indicators could reveal meaningful patterns associated with changing exposure conditions. This distinction is extremely important. The project focuses on environmental awareness and trend detection. In many operational settings, identifying a trend may be more useful than knowing an exact concentration value. If a facility consistently experiences worsening environmental conditions during certain periods, that information may support operational decision-making. The next challenge involved selecting sensors capable of measuring these variables while remaining affordable and reliable. Selecting sensors may seem straightforward, but in practice, it is one of the most important aspects of system design. Every sensor involves trade-offs. Higher accuracy often comes with higher cost. Greater sophistication may introduce additional complexity. Reliability may sometimes be more valuable than precision. For monitoring volatile compounds, I selected the Sensirion SGP30 sensor. The SGP30 is a metal oxide gas sensor capable of estimating total volatile organic compounds and equivalent carbon dioxide. Several factors influence this decision. First, the sensor is relatively affordable. Second, it is compact and easy to integrate into embedded systems. Third, it provides continuous measurements suitable for long-term monitoring applications. And fourth, it has extensive documentation and community support. However, the sensor also has minor limitations. The SGP30 does not identify individual trichloramine compounds. It cannot determine whether a detected volatile compound is chloramine, cleaning product residue, or another airborne chemical. Instead, it provides information regarding overall volatile compound behavior. This limitation is important to acknowledge. The project intentionally prioritizes trend monitoring rather than chemical specificity. Temperature and humidity monitoring required a separate sensor. Initially, I selected the SHT31. The SHT31 offers excellent performance and communicates through the I2C protocol. During early testing, however, I encountered several challenges. Within the enclosure communication, reliability occasionally became inconsistent. Although the sensor itself performed well, system stability became a concern. After additional troubleshooting, I transitioned to the DHT22 sensor. The DHT22 sensor uses a simple communication architecture and ultimately provided a more reliable operation within the final design. This experience taught me an important engineering lesson. The most advanced component is not always the best component. In practical applications, reliability often matters more than theoretical performance specifications. A sensor that functions consistently provides more value than a highly accurate sensor that behaves unpredictably. Another important consideration involved was environmental conditions. Indoor pools present challenging environments for electronics. Humidity levels are elevated, temperature fluctuations occur regularly, condensation may develop under certain conditions. These factors influenced both sensor placement and enclosure design. Ultimately, the final sensor configuration balanced affordability, functionality, and reliability while supporting the overall objective of this project. Once the hardware components were selected, the next challenge involved developing software capable of coordinating all system operations. Hardware alone does not create a monitoring system. Without software, sensors simply produce raw signals. The software architecture serves as the bridge between hardware and useful information. The system was programmed using MicroPython. MicroPython is a lightweight version of Python designed specifically for microcontrollers. I selected MicroPython because it combines flexibility, readability, and rapid development capabilities. When the device powers on, a series of initialization procedures occur automatically. The first task involves establishing communication with all connected sensors. The microcontroller verifies that each sensor is available and functioning correctly. Once communication is confirmed, the system enters a brief stabilization period. This warm-up phase is particularly important for metal oxide gas sensors. Gas sensors often require time to establish stable baseline conditions after startup. Without the stabilization period, measurements may be inconsistent. Following stabilization, baseline environmental conditions are recorded. The device then enters its primary operating loop. Within this loop, sensor data is collected continuously. Measurements are processed and formulated for display. Updated values are transmitted to the OLED screen. Data is simultaneously recorded for later analysis. This process repeats continuously throughout operation. Although the final software appears relatively straightforward, development involved numerous challenges. One, recurring issues involved communication conflicts. Multiple devices occasionally attempted to access shared communication channels simultaneously. This produced intermittent errors that were difficult to diagnose. Initialization order also became important. Some sensors would fail unless startup sequences occurred in a specific order. Several software libraries required modification before functioning correctly within the MicroPython environment. Debugging these issues often required extensive testing. Many hours were spent isolating errors, verifying communication pathways, and refining system behavior. Although troubleshooting can be frustrating, it is an essential part of engineering. In fact, some of the most valuable lessons from this project emerged not from successful operation, but from solving unexpected failures. Once the hardware and software were functioning reliably, the next step involved evaluating system performance through structured testing. After developing the monitoring platform, it was necessary to determine whether it could actually detect meaningful environmental changes. To answer this question, I designed a multi-phase testing strategy. The first phase focused on controlled validation. Before introducing the device into a pool environment, I wanted to verify that sensors responded appropriately under simpler conditions. Testing occurred in non-pool environments where variables could be more easily controlled. The primary objectives was validation, stability assessment, and software verification. This phase helped identify technical issues before field deployment. The second phase consisted of poolside monitoring trials. These trials represented the core of the study. A total of 9 monitoring sessions were conducted. Each session lasted approximately 1 hour. To improve consistency, device placement remained constant whenever possible. Sampling procedures were standardized across trials. One major objective involved comparing periods of low swimmer activity with periods of high swimmer activity. This comparison is important because chloramine formation depends heavily on swimmer-introduced contaminants. As occupation increases, opportunities for chloramine formation increases as well. The third phase expanded validation efforts through the co-location and ventilation studies. Although this is a future work, the co-location study would involve measurements from the prototype, which would be compared against higher grade commercial air quality instruments. The goal would not be to necessary identical readings. Instead, it would be to determine whether both systems responded similarly to changing environmental conditions. Trend agreement is often more important than absolute agreement when evaluating screening tools. The ventilation study would examine how environmental indicators would respond to changes in airflow conditions. Ventilation plays a critical role in indoor aquatic air quality. Effective ventilation helps remove airborne contaminants and improve environmental conditions. Observing sensor behavior under varying ventilation conditions would provide additional insight into system responsiveness. Together, these three testing phases will provide a comprehensive evaluation of both technical performance and real-world functionality. The resulting dataset formed the basis for the statistical analysis and observation that I will discuss next. And this brings us to the most important question of the entire project. What did the data actually show? At this point, I've discussed the scientific motivation, engineering design, sensor selection, software architecture, and experimental methodology. Now, I would like to focus on the most important question of the project. What did the data actually reveal? The results presented here are organized around three major observations. First, the relationship between risk classification and TVOC concentration. Second, the relationship between relative humidity and TVOC concentration. And third, the time series behavior observed during actual poolside monitoring sessions. Let's begin with the graph on the far left. The figure plots TVOC concentration against the risk classification index developed for the study. The relationship is extremely strong. The calculated R-squared value was 0.991, with a p-value below 0.001. To put this into context, an R-squared value describes how well one variable explains variation in another. An R-squared value of 1 would represent a perfect relationship. Values approaching 1 indicate increasingly strong association. An R-squared value of 0.991 therefore suggests that the observed relationship was highly consistent within the collected dataset. As risk classification increased, TVOC concentrations increased in a predictable manner. This result is important because it suggests that the environmental indicators are not behaving randomly. Instead, they appear to respond systematically to changing environmental conditions. For a screening tool, consistency is critical. If measurements fluctuate unpredictably, the data becomes difficult to interpret. However, the strong relationship observed here suggests that the monitoring variables may provide useful information regarding environmental changes occurring within the facility. The second graph examines the relationship between relative humidity and TVOC concentration. Again, we observe a remarkably strong correlation. The calculated R-squared value was 0.992. As relative humidity increased, TVOC concentrations increased as well. This observation is interesting for several reasons. Humidity plays an important role in indoor aquatic environments. Swimming pools naturally generate large amounts of moisture. Ventilation systems must continuously manage humidity levels to maintain comfort and protect building infrastructure. Humidity can also influence how airborne compounds behave. Changes in moisture levels may affect containment persistence, transport, and dispersion. While humidity itself does not create chloramines, it contributes to the environmental conditions that influence exposure. The third graph may be the most intuitive. This figure shows TVOC concentration as a function of time during an actual monitoring session. Notice the overall pattern. As swimmer activity increased, TVOC concentration increased. As swimmer activity decreased, TVOC concentration began declining. This trend aligns closely with established understanding of chloramine chemistry. More swimmers introduce more contaminants into the water. These contaminants increase opportunities for chloramine formation. At the same time, increased swimmer movement generates additional turbulence and mixing at the water surface. This may enhance transfer of volatile compounds into the surrounding air. The observed time series behavior therefore makes sense from both a chemical and operational perspective. Perhaps most importantly, these trends were repeatable. The system consistently detected changes associated with occupancy patterns and environmental conditions. For a low-cost monitoring platform, this consistency represents an encouraging result. At the same time, it is important to remember that these findings do and do not demonstrate. The results do not prove direct chloramine concentration. What they do demonstrate is that the selected environmental indicators respond meaningfully to changing conditions associated with swimmer activity. That distinction is essential for interpreting the project appropriately. The findings support the feasibility of a proxy monitoring system. They do not eliminate the need for direct validation studies. With that understanding in mind, let's discuss what these results may mean from a practical perspective. The purpose of discussion is not simply to restate results. Instead, it is to examine what those results mean within a broader scientific and operational context. Several important conclusions emerge from this study. The first conclusion is that proxy monitoring appears to be a viable approach for detecting environmental changes associated with swimmer activity. The monitored variables consistently respond to changing occupancy patterns. This behavior is exactly what one would hope to observe from a screening tool. If environmental conditions worsen, the monitoring system should respond. If conditions improve, the monitoring system should respond accordingly. The data suggests that this occurred repeatedly throughout testing. The second conclusion involves consistency with established chloramine science. Previous research has demonstrated that chloramine formation is strongly influenced by swimmer-introduced contaminants. As swimmer density increases, opportunities for chloramine formations increase as well. The trend observed in this project align with that understanding. Periods of higher swimmer activity generally correspond with higher measured environmental indicators. This agreement between observed trends and established theory increases confidence in the overall findings. The third conclusion concerns practical implementation. Many aquatic facilities face significant resource constraints. Not every facility can purchase advanced analytical instrumentation. Not every facility can perform routine laboratory sampling. Consequently, there is a substantial value in developing monitor approaches that are affordable and accessible. A low-cost screening system may allow facilities to continuously observe environmental conditions and identify trends that would otherwise remain unnoticed. For example, A facility might discover that environmental indicators consistently worsen during specific practice sessions. Alternatively, operators might observe improvements following ventilation adjustments. Continuous monitoring transforms environmental conditions from isolated measurements into observable patterns. This type of information can support operational decision making. It may also encourage a more proactive approach to air quality management. Rather than waiting for complaints or symptoms, facilities could potentially identify concerning trends earlier. Another important implication involves education and awareness. Many swimmers are familiar with strong chlorine smells often associated with pools. However, relatively few understand the chemistry behind the odor. Monitoring systems can help make environmental conditions more visible and understandable. Data often facilitate conversations that might otherwise remain subjective. Instead of saying the pool smells stronger today, users can examine measurable environmental trends. This shift from perception to observation can be valuable. Despite these encouraging findings, it is equally important to recognize that help to define the conclusions that can be reasonably drawn and where future work is needed. As we approach the conclusion of the presentation, I would like to summarize the key accomplishments of this project and discuss future directions. The original objective was straightforward. Could a low-cost embedded system monitor proxy indicators associated with chloramine-related air quality conditions? Based on the results obtained during testing, the answer appears to be yes. The project successfully produced a portable environmental monitoring platform capable of continuous operation. The hardware integrated sensors, microcontroller, display, power supply, and enclosure into a self-contained system. The software architecture supported continuous data collection, processing, and display. Field testing demonstrated that the system could detect repeatable environmental trends associated with swimmer activity. Strong statistical relationships were observed among several monitored variables. Time series monitoring revealed patterns that aligned with expected occupancy-related environmental challenges. Taken together, these findings suggest that the proxy monitoring may provide useful information regarding changing air quality conditions in indoor aquatic facilities. However, this project should be viewed as a beginning rather than an endpoint. Several important research opportunities remain. The first priority is direct validation. Future studies should compare proxy measurements directly against established trichloramine sampling methods. This would provide stronger evidence regarding the relationship between environmental indicators and actual chloramine concentrations. The second priority involves improved selectivity. Additional sensors may help distinguish chloramine-related conditions from other environmental influences. Combining multiple sensing modalities could improve classification accuracy. The third priority involves algorithm refinement. As larger datasets become available, risk classification methods can become more sophisticated. Machine learning and predictive modeling may eventually provide additional opportunities for identifying environmental patterns. The fourth priority involves multi-site testing. Evaluating system performance across multiple aquatic facilities would help determine how broadly the approach can be applied. Perhaps the most exciting next steps involves expanding the project through external support. I'm currently in the process of pursuing a grant funding to support the next phase of this research. If awarded, this funding would allow for more insight into chloramine and how the system can detect those. The goal is to move from a proof of concept system toward a more extensively validated environmental monitoring platform. Ultimately, I hope this work contributes to a healthier indoor aquatic environment. Swimmers, coaches, lifeguards, instructors, and facility staff all spend significant time within these spaces. Providing accessible tools that improve environmental awareness may help support better decision making and healthier outcomes. Although this project represents only one step toward the goal, I believe it demonstrates the potential value of affordable sensing technologies and aquatic health applications. This concludes my presentation. Before opening the floor to questions, I would like to thank everyone who contributed to this work. I would like to acknowledge my mentors, family members, and supporters who provided guidance throughout this project. I would also like to thank the Council Monic Aquatic Health Code for the opportunity to present this research. It is a privilege to share this work with professionals whose expertise spans environmental health, aquatic facility management, engineering, epidemiology, and public health. As a student researcher, one of the most rewarding aspects of this project has been the opportunity to learn from experts and contribute to conversations that have real-world relevance. Indoor aquatic air quality is a complex challenge. There is no single solution. However, progress often begins with asking questions, exploring new ideas, and testing practical approaches. This project represents one attempt to do exactly that. I hope the findings presented today contribute to ongoing discussions regarding environmental monitoring, swimmer health, and the development of accessible technologies for aquatic facilities. Thank you very much for your time, your attention, and your interest in this work. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you, Aditi. Just as a reminder, if you would place any questions into chat. Before we start the chat questions, Aditi, I just have this is amazing work. It's just super impressive that you're doing this, right? I think that goes without saying. What was your biggest surprise in this?
I feel that my biggest surprise personally in this project, I guess, was just the initial stages of it. I felt I didn't know what chloramines were until last year, and it just was like a big aha moment for me. And it made me understand so much about what I was feeling as well as others in indoor pools. And like I said in my presentation, it was just so normalized to feel those things like, oh, like, yeah, I don't feel great, whatever. But no one really stopped and questioned why this was happening. And when I finally did that, it was like the biggest aha moment, I think, for me, and like my biggest surprise of what chloramines are and what they can do.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome, Aditi. We have one question that came in a chat already. First off, is the poster says amazing work. Do you have an estimate on what the low cost may be considered for this?
Yes. So for I have two prototypes. I can go back. The first one on the left is with the DHT22 sensor, and that one is about $55, and then the one on the right is about $70. It has the SHT31 sensor, which I was able to integrate this year.
So under $100. Wow.
Yeah.
That's just amazing. Just absolutely amazing. So any questions, go ahead and pop them in. Give about a minute or so for folks to get their questions in. Aditi, while any questions are going in, obviously you're going to continue your work, which I highly encourage you to do. You're just a really impressive young lady. What's your plans for the future?
Like higher education or
Yeah, yeah. Like, has this work changed? What you were thinking you were going to be doing when you go to school and beyond, or how has this impacted you and your career focus?
well, um, my I've always wanted to become a doctor. Like I don't think that's ever going to change, but I do plan to study chemistry and environmental science in my undergrad. So, yeah.
Well, I think I speak for everyone. We have a dearth of aquatics related researchers in the country at the academic level. And, hopefully this kind of steers you towards that because for one, will be very interested to see the work that you do over the next 20 years. If you're doing this at your age now, what will you be doing in 20 years research wise, right? It's just brilliant stuff. So another question came in, right? Is your school going to implement this? Are they considering this for their operations?
I have not talked to my school about implementation of this device. I asked my school if I could, because my school has a pool. I asked them if I could test there, but they unfortunately denied me, so I have not um asked about implementation of this
Okay.
device there.
Last call for any questions. Great. Aditi, thank you for coming on today. It truly is a pleasure
Thank you
to,
so much for having me.
yeah, you're very welcome. It truly is a pleasure to see and encourage, the next generation of researchers. And it gives me great hope about our future. I have long been worried about what comes after, as me and some of my peers have discussed, the lack of research, the lack of people coming up. So you've given tremendous hope for me for the future of research in our industry. So thank you very, very much. So
Thank
big,
you for having
big
me.
shout out to Aditi. And everyone will be looking at you and monitoring to see where you go in the future. So amazing work.
Thank you.
All right. Well, with that being said, we're going to go ahead and close out the webinar. So hope everyone has a great summer. We're just now kicking off the summer season. I know I've got a swim meet going on right now for summer league and a whole bunch of other things. So we're going to get back to our regularly planned, pool operations for the summer. I wish everyone a great and happy summer, and we'll see you for the next webinar. All right. Thanks, Aditi.
Thank you. Bye.